So this is the 23:55 hours GMT edition of the Baby Angel Geronimo editions, KhoodeelaarTV television channel, broadcast on the internet, not on satellite, not on terrestrial. This is Tuesday, the 14th of March 2023. Now, this is part B, and the updates include our comments about the role being played by the mental slave Stephen Bush, born in 1990 in Tower Hamlets, and described in his wiki entry as a being of Jewish heritage. Doesn't refer to his African side, but he's obviously described as mixed race with half African and half Jewish heritage. Now, Stephen Bush is denouncing what the fascists love to denounce, which is the retreat by the fascists controlling the BBC bureaucracy over the remarks that Gary Lineker had made and the deal that has been made so far. Stephen Bush, as a mental slave, has the role assigned to him to undermine anything that attacks the racists, attacks the imperialists and colonialists, because the last time he put himself in a similar position as the slave owners was after the BBC employee Laura Trevelyan and her family had paid token amounts of reparations for owning slaves. And Stephen Bush, whose afro hair is exceedingly exacerbated and aggravated and expanded to make sure that he looks like an African, so that he is not mistaken for being a pale-skinned mixed race descendant of mixed parentage. Stephen Bush is a mental slave, and his role is to undermine anything that the anti-racists, the pro-democratic campaigners managed to achieve in the United Kingdom. That kind of achievement is, by definition, very rare and very infrequent. Now, today's Financial Times, that is Tuesday, the 14th of March, 2023, carries this stupid piece on page 23 as an opinion by stupid Bush under society, and says Lineker and free speech, problematic new realm. Problematic. Anything that has the slightest hint of defeating or exposing the racists and fascists must be problematic according to this mental slave and his servitude and his mental slave's assignment. So let's see what the mental slave says. Remember, in part 1 or part A, today we discussed the Guardian columnist, Owen Jones. So in addition to Owen Jones, here is Stephen Bush. Now, this mental slave is doing what mental slaves are assigned to do, which is to distract attention from the fascistic attacks by Suella Crueller Eviller Fernandez on the most vulnerable. And he's not talking about the brazen, brazen breaches of the obligations under the treaties that the United Kingdom remains obliged to carry out according to the more than 1,000 treaties that the United Kingdom remains signed up to. And there is no reference to the fact that Joan Salter, MBE, 81-year-old survivor of Nazis, Belgian born, Joan Salter settled in the United Kingdom, and she confronted Suella Eviller Braverman in person at Fareham, at a meeting in Fareham, which is the constituency that Suella Eviller Crueller represents for the Conservatives. And it was Joan Salter's expose of and on Suella Eviller Crueller that actually highlighted the fact that in the 1930s, not 1940s, the 1930s, the Nazis in Germany had carried out a brainwashing program of dehumanizing narrations aimed at the Jews, at the trade unionists, and others, and made them dehumanized kind of images, which their neighbors, being brainwashed, then carried out according to the plan that the Nazis had confected during the narrative in the 1930s. And that carrying out of the agenda was the Holocaust in the 1940s. So the attention should be and should have been on what Joan Salter said, not on what Gary Lineker said, because Gary Lineker said a very small fraction of what Joan Salter said. And Gary Lineker could never match the empirical wealth of evidence that Joan Salter has as a survivor herself of Nazis. So Stephen Bush idiotically is talking about Disney, about Tim Davie, and all the rest of it, but he's not talking about the international treaties. And this mental slave, in his wiki entry, is exhibited as a fellow of an Oxford college. What does it mean? What does it amount to? It amounts to mental slavery and appeasement. So Stephen Bush is appeasing today's propagandists that are actually carrying out on the level of actual agenda, carrying out the same purpose of demonizing people that are most vulnerable, most innocent, and most in need of protection, as guaranteed by the Refugee Convention 1951, to which the United Kingdom remains a signatory. So we shall be, of course, expanding on the roles being played by the mental slave Stephen Bush and the hocus pocus bogus left winger at the Guardian, Owen Jones. All of them are trying to hide the real attacks, which are the attacks modeled, designed on the Nazis' narrative, Nazis' agenda of dehumanizing the vulnerable, dehumanizing the most in need of help and protection and refuge and asylum. There is a piece in the kind of media outlet about the fact that in addition to Shamima Begum, there are children, many children who are being left to kind of suffer in agony and frustration in the Kurdish controlled so-called camps within Syria. And the governments, especially the government of Trinidad, the governments are refusing to take back these children. So what are the opinions pieces saying about these this is the one it's in an outlet called commonwealthroundtable.co.uk, and it is talking about victims of ISIS, Citizenship Council. Now it's talking about the citizenship of Shamima Begum. The most comprehensive study from Daesh to diaspora by King's College London's International Center for the Study of Radicalization estimates IS had 52,808 foreigners from 80 countries, including 6,902 women and 6,577 minors, up to 60% of whom were born in the Caliphate. The report identified a serious problem for several Commonwealth states. The United Kingdom had an estimated 900 citizens who joined IS. Australia had 232. Malaysia had up to 154, while Canada had 110 to 120. Singapore had just 8. Some Malaysian and Singaporean militants followed IS's instructions to wage jihad in the Philippines. Bangladesh had 40. Pakistan and Kenya a suspiciously rounded 100 each. Sri Lanka 32 to 36, and South Africa had 140 to 163. Some figures seem implausible. Could Trinidad and Tobago's 1.4 million people really have contributed far more zealots, 130 to 250, than the 67 to 75 from India's 200 million Muslims? So this study is suspect itself. And then there is this item or this section headed Citizenship Cancelled. By 2019, British MPs heard only 40 people had been successfully prosecuted in the United Kingdom. Of 300 returnees, most people wished to bar them. A parliamentary petition signed by nearly 600,000 people called for all ISIS members to have their citizenship and passports cancelled, even though it is illegal under international law to strip somebody's nationality if it leaves them stateless. The UK's quandary over how to deal with its returnee jihadists is best illustrated by Shamima Begum, one of three East London schoolgirl friends who made their way to the IS stronghold of Raqqa. She polarizes opinion. To some, she deserves compassion as misguided victim of grooming and trafficking. Who has seen all three of her infants die. To most, she was a willing ISIS bride who enforced the caliphate's rule as member of its feared religious police. After fleeing from Baghouz, the last IS stronghold, Begum was found in an STF detainees camp. The UK removed her citizenship in 2019, claiming she had Bangladeshi nationality through her parents. The decision was upheld last month, leaving her marooned in the Syrian camp. Now, this is leaving out the fact that she is not Bangladeshi citizen, and she could not be, not even through her parents, because this has to be tested. And however, the government's own legal advisor on terrorism, Jonathan Hall KC, said she should be returned and prosecuted, saying repatriation, if it took place, should not be confused with moral absolution. He added, that is Jonathan Hall, the status quo does not eliminate risk, but all this is extra legal rather than a basis for policy. A Times leader argued the government has all given no, reading that again. A Times leader, that is an editorial, argued the government has still given no convincing answer on why Shamima Begum must not return home, or what threat she still poses that cannot be countered by close monitoring. Punishing people by leaving them stateless in the desert is no answer to terrorism. And the Times leader asked, what about the youngest detainees left to rot in camps? Is there any doubt that these children, now young, will be brutally schooled into becoming terrorists themselves? Jonathan Halls believes IS volunteers, children in particular, must be repatriated. Manage return with proper preparation, reception committees, police with risk management plans in place, local authorities primed to undertake safeguarding, wider family members engaged is better than chaotic return. Now, this is the first time, absolutely the first time, that I'm reading the word safeguarding, and that I'm reading safeguarding in connection with the local councils. The Khoodeelaar campaign is the only one that has been talking about safeguarding duties neglected by Tower Hamlets Council, but this is the first piece that has taken it from Jonathan Hall's statement, which includes, strangely enough and surprisingly enough, this reference to the existence of the safeguarding duties owed by the local councils, which raises the question also that Shamima and her two friends should have been safeguarded even before they got radicalized, if they got radicalized. And they should have been prevented from getting brainwashed and ending up in the way that they have ended up. The Canadian government has said it favors reintegrating returnees into society, but its more progressive approach also has its pitfalls. So this piece is quite a novel one. This is the first time that a almost almost reasonable piece has been written about Shamima Begum and others in her position by any news outlet. This is a organization called Commonwealth Roundtable.co.uk, which I'm only coming across today for the first time because it appeared in the course of the search that I have done for updating on the Shamima Begum situation. So we shall be talking about this one more. We shall check on this regularly from now on. And we shall probably comment on this piece, which I am not reading in full, but the fact that they have really questioned the authenticity or the rigorous nature or rigorousness of the London University research project in its counting of numbers of IS children and detainees from countries with various sizes of populations shows that these people whoever they are doing the Commonwealth Roundtable.co.uk are actually trying to get the facts, not necessarily as accurately as or as rigorously as we have been doing, but at least they're doing it more rigorously than any of the Fleet Street papers, including The Guardian, of course. So let's check on the other items that we need to check on by way of updates.
Well, hello there, you're watching the press preview. A first look then at what is on the front pages. Time to see what is making the headlines with The Guardian's deputy political editor, Jessica Elgott, and the deputy editor of Conservative Home, Henry Hill. Welcome to both of you. No surprises, of course. As you might expect, the Financial Times previews tomorrow's budget, Jeremy Hunt's first as Chancellor, in which he is expected to increase investment in businesses in what's being described as a budget for growth. Crying out for help, that's the front of the Mirror, a message to the Chancellor to be fair to those who need it most. Similarly, The Telegraph leads with Hunt faces revolt over tax rise in budget. The Guardian highlighting the £4 billion worth of childcare funding expected to be announced for the parents of 1- and 2-year-olds in England. The Times says more free childcare to get parents back in jobs. The Eye also focusing on childcare and the expected announcement of an extra 30 hours a week for toddlers. As does the Daily Mail, the headline free preschool childcare in back to work budget. Meanwhile, the Express calls it Hunt's carrot and stick to get Britain growing. And with its tongue firmly in cheek, City AM says, let's hope this one goes better than Liz and Kwasi's. A budget for growth, though, the title there. The Metro has the story of the American drone downed by a Russian fighter jet over the Black Sea near Ukraine. come on to that a bit later on. Just a reminder though, by scanning the QR code you'll see on screen during the programme, you can check out the front pages of tomorrow's newspapers while you watch us. So let's head straight to Jessica and Henry. Lots to talk about with a budget for growth. It had been billed as a budget for work or to get people back to work. And Jessica, part of that, many of the papers picking up on, is the help for childcare, which many parents would say is desperately needed.
Yeah, so this was a story that we broke this afternoon, and the Treasury seems to have given everybody else the nod that it's right, and that this is something he'll announce tomorrow. A £4 billion expansion of free childcare for 1 and 2 year olds. At the moment, a lot of parents don't get any help at all for 1 and 2 year olds. Some of the poorest households do get some help for 2 year olds, but it's only really at 3 that those free hours kick in. And this plan would give 30 hours a week, the same as parents of 3 year olds get to 1 and 2 year olds, increase funding as well for providers, which is a big ask of the sector, because essentially they've been saying, while the Treasury's been mulling on these plans, we're not paying our staff enough, you're not paying enough for these free hours, and therefore providers are having to close because of that. So it's a costly thing to do if you're going to up how much you pay the providers and expand how many free hours you give to parents. But it's a huge boost. It will save many, many families hundreds of pounds a month.
Yes, providers having to close or charge parents the nominal extra, if you like, to top up because the money the government gives isn't quite enough. The Times also picking up on that, more free childcare to get parents back in jobs. How will people feel about this as a giveaway policy, do you think, Henry?
Well, I think for the reasons that Jess set out, it will obviously be popular. Childcare is something that a lot of people struggle with. And if the government's priority is getting people back into the workforce, then providing more support for parents to allow them to do that is obviously a good thing. I think this is another example, though, of just how the Treasury having to spend lots of money to make up for this what should be easier policy decisions that they just won't make, right? Because ultimately Liz Truss tried to slightly deregulate childcare, bringing the number of children an individual carer could look after down to the norms in that distant country, Scotland, and that has continually failed every time it's been attempted, and therefore this is more expensive, and therefore, despite huge pressures on the public purse, the fact that they're going to have to deliver these public sector pay rises at some point and all the rest of it, they're having to throw £4 billion at this policy. Will it be enough to actually make this sustainable over the long term? I don't know, but it is a good retail offer, and it does matter to people. But it's fundamentally a sign of pumping more money we don't really have into a system that politicians are afraid to reform.
Yes, and the details of this, the Times tells us that Hunt believes that childcare is key to unlocking growth, and under the plans, the free childcare will be available to all parents of children aged 1 and 2, provided they earn less than £100,000 each and both parents work for 16 hours a week. At present, the 30 hours of free childcare offer is only available to parents of those aged 3 and 4. So certainly bringing it down the age range and encouraging those with younger children to head back to work earlier. That the budget for work, or driving people back to work, he has said in his statement this evening, will focus on disabled people, those with long-term health conditions, parents, as we've discussed, the over 50s, as we discussed last night because of the pensions, and also people on universal credit. But the main thrust of it, as we head to the Financial Times, to unveil a budget for growth. Now, you might say that's something of a sop to the Trussites who are smarting about the corporation tax increases which are due, Jessica.
Yeah, and they're also, that you're not seeing those kind of big headline tax cuts that a lot of Tory MPs do want to see. I think you'll see, I think, a little bit more of the kind of Truss budget, perhaps in a kind of slimmed down version than we might have expected to be resurrected. So there will be some of that deregulation for housing, the very niche nutrient neutrality, which many Tory MPs blame, a hangover from EU law that seems to stop some housing getting built. Investment zones, we remember them from the other budget. So there is stuff that was in it that is kind of finding its way back into the Treasury's. But one of the things that is not moving. So it seems is this plan to increase corporation tax from 19 to 25%, and to end that super deduction, which was offering a big tax relief, extra tax relief on companies' purchases. So I think we're going to get something to replace that, but still, it's something that Tory MPs say is one of the things that holding back growth, holding back foreign companies from investing in the UK.
Yes, Daily Express talks about Hunt's carrot and stick to get Britain growing and working. In the Treasury announcement tonight, the changes are expected to encourage benefit claimants to move into work or increase their hours, with increased sanctions enforcement and work coach support, and the childcare costs on universal credit to be paid up front. But if we go to the Daily Telegraph and pick up on the complaints about corporation tax and the failure to reduce taxes, the Telegraph is talking, Henry, about a revolt. Tell us what that might be. He's saying suggestion that the levy on companies, the corporation tax increase, will have a chilling effect on the economy, the opposite of growth.
Yeah, well, so there's sort of two sort of sides to this. The political side is that, yes, the Trussites, and there are still, quite a lot of them, are smarting from the very abrupt nature, shall we say, of her premiership and the decision by Rishi Sunak and Jeremy Hunt to move away from her vision. And they truly believe that conservatism means delivering lower taxes, and that will drive growth. And so they're going to try and put pressure on the government. But I think the other issue is just that, we hear this is going to be a budget for business. And yet, a lot of the headline issues coming out so far are not particularly business friendly. Whatever you think of the increase in corporation tax rates, that's not pro-business. Ending the super not pro-business, even if it is replaced with full expensing, which basically is the company's value of the capital investments they make against tax. And there are things that the Treasury could do. They could, for example, raise the threshold at which small businesses have to register for VAT. Currently, there's a huge clustering effect of businesses which are deliberately not growing because they don't want to have to start charging VAT to their existing customers. If you raised that, you would allow SMEs to grow. And we haven't yet seen much of that either, because there's a fundamental tension between the Treasury's need to get revenue in and the idea of, if you give the companies some rope now, then they will generate growth, and that growth will pay off in 1, 2, 5 years' time. So I think a lot of Conservatives are concerned. Yes, some of them are just angry Trussites, but others are concerned that actually it's very easy to say the word growth. Every politician says the word growth. You're not going to find many politicians who don't like growth in theory. But, there's a reason we haven't had it for so long, and that's because an awful lot of the policies that actually militate against growth are individually very popular. And this housing thing is actually just another example. Instead of just scrapping this requirement that the EU courts came up with, they're coming up with a complicated balancing and trade-off scheme. Now, yes, that might help, but that's still going to involve more costs for councils, more costs for planners, more costs in the process. And it's going to mean that we're still behind on house building where we were before that judgment was handed down.
Yeah, the City AM picks up on a budget for growth with that comment. Let's hope this one goes better than Liz and Kwasi's. And certainly in his statement, Jeremy Hunt suggested that the autumn statement last year was to bring stability, and this one is to bring growth. And just very quickly, the Daily Mirror, Jessica, just very, very quickly if you can, because the backdrop to all of this, of course, is strikes in multiple sectors, public sector staff going off.
Yeah, and it points out that it isn't anything identified so far for public sector workers, although there is a settlement that will come for them for this next year. But there's big strikes going on tomorrow, tube teacher strikes, and it's not a great, the backdrop of that industrial strife is not a great one.
Okay, lovely and brief. Thank you very much indeed. Overrunning, as you can see. Lots more still to come, though. A major diplomatic incident as a Russian fighter jet shoots down an American drone. Not shoots down, apologies, nudges it. Anyway, we'll discuss that next. Well, welcome back. You're watching the press preview with me once again, Jessica Elgott and Henry Hill. Henry, pick up, if you can, on the front page of the Metro then, the incident of the 2 Russian jets and the US unmanned drone over the Black Sea.
Yeah, so this story is sort of remarkably on brand for what we've learned about Vladimir Putin's war machine, because you originally hear it and you think, oh my God, the Russians have shot down an American drone. And then you read on and you find that actually what happens is they flew into it. But basically this highlights the 2 Russian jets have impacted with an American drone. And this highlights the very serious danger that there is about escalation, because fundamentally both countries have assets in the area. Obviously, Russia is busy invading Ukraine, but America isn't on the ground, but is in the air over the Black Sea. And this is exactly the kind of thing that people who are worried about Vladimir Putin and what he could do are worried about, because they don't want to see America and the Western NATO countries, which have so far held a very firm line against directly intervening for all the support they've given Ukraine, getting dragged step by step into a direct confrontation with Russia. Now, this is an isolated incident, and there's no sign so far that either country is intending to escalate, but it is a sign of the huge stakes that there are in that part of the world.
Lots of inside pages on that. Many papers have bumped it off, obviously, for the budget. But page 2 of the Mirror has the Russian jet, but it also has this down its right-hand side, the news that Boris Johnson will give evidence on Partygate. Some people suggesting a marathon grilling is what he's due. Jessica.
Yeah, and we saw a couple of weeks ago, or a lot early last week, that the Privileges Committee has got a lot of very, very difficult things to put to Boris Johnson, including from testimony it's taken from people inside his Downing Street, and this will be televised. Boris Johnson has seen lots of that evidence, so we can see how those MPs are going to grill him on the committee, and what answers he's got to some of the new revelations that have come out.
Jessica, Henry, thank you both very much indeed. Plenty to talk about tonight, certainly. We will see you for more in the 11, more details, obviously, of the budget. Right now, though, let's take a look at the weather.
So we go back to Pakistan, and the statement by Imran Khan says that he is surprised that the police have taken the step to let's see what he says. He said that the way we were targeted by the police, it is a first. There is no reason why they have taken this step. My bail was on the 18th of March. They knew why I was not attending the bail, because of security. And then he says that they are preparing again. I know I have given an undertaking in the Lahore High Court that I will be in court on the 18th of March. But it was not accepted. Imran Khan said ahead of his possible arrest. Why was it not taken? Because London is part of the plan. Nawaz Sharif has been given assurance that me and my party will be attacked and pulled down, Imran Khan said, while condemning the police for charging the supporters with batons and tear gas shells. Imran Khan's supporters gathered outside his house as a police team arrived from Islamabad to arrest him. On a court order, while Imran Khan called on his supporters to stand up for the supremacy of law and fight for the true independence, which is Haque The Vedh. Police have come to arrest and send me to jail. If something happens to me or sent to jail or they kill me, you have to prove that this nation will continue to struggle even without Imran Khan, he said, in a video recorded statement following the violence. Several of Imran Khan's supporters were injured when the police resorted to tear gas shelling, Reuters news agency reported. The arrest warrant was issued in a case against Imran Khan for unlawfully selling state gifts while in power from 2018 to 2022. So the item has been written for the Hindustan Times by Mallika Soni. Who are not reading, this ex-literature student can be found searching for an answer to the question, what is the purpose of journalism in society? Well, that is quite interesting. we shall be joining the quest. Let's go back to the UK domestic issue and the question of the BBC. Let's see if there is any reference to Jones Soldier. Ian Wright has said managers at the BBC made a hot mess by asking Gary Lineker to step away from Match of the Day. At the beginning of this podcast, this is from the Times website 35 minutes ago. This is the item that is accompanied by a picture of Gary Lineker and Alan Shearer and Ian Wright. So he says that it's the BBC that made the mess. That is the Times, and it's paywall, so we can't access the full copy there online. Gary Lineker resumes normal service with quick-witted Arling Haaland quip. Let's see what the Mirror is referring to by Arling Haaland or Haaland quip. What is he saying? Gary Lineker resumes normal service with quick-witted Arling Haaland quip. Match of the Day host Gary Lineker is back to his best on Twitter, making a light-hearted quip about Arling Haaland after the Manchester City ace scored 5 goals in one game. Gary Lineker has been back to his mischievous best on the social media in the wake of Arling Haaland's destructive performance in Manchester City's emphatic 7-0 win over RB Leipzig on Tuesday night. The Match of the Day host landed himself in hot water with BBC last week when he criticized the government's new migration bill on his Twitter account. The former England striker described the bill, which was unveiled by Home Secretary Suella Braverman, as beyond awful, and said the language used was not dissimilar to that used by Germany in the 1930s. Nothing wrong with that at all, factually. That led to the BBC removing the 62-year-old from the air ahead of last weekend's broadcast, an act that I'll read that again. That led to the BBC removing the 62-year-old from the air ahead of last weekend's broadcast, an act that saw a raft of his BBC Sport colleagues refuse to work in solidarity with Lineker. The corporation eventually backtracked amid some fierce criticism and struck an agreement for Lineker to resume his role on Monday morning, and it hasn't taken the popular presenter to get back to his best on social media. After watching Haaland demolish Leipzig in the Champions League on Tuesday night, Lineker reacted to the Norwegian striker's remarkable 5-goal haul with a tongue-in-cheek tweet quipping, "Think this Arling Haaland fella's got something." After blitzing his latest multi-goal haul, Haaland has now become the youngest player in Champions League history to bag 30 goals in the tournament, breaking the record which was previously held by Paris Saint-Germain superstar Kylian Mbappe or Mbappe. Kylian, however you pronounce it. Haaland's 5-goal haul also broke a club record too. The 22-year-old now has 39 goals in all competitions for City, meaning he has eclipsed the previous club record for goals in a season which was set by Tommy Johnston in the 1928-29 campaign with 38. So this is the kind of record that actually goes back to the 1920s. And the rest of the copy is about Haaland. So we shall be bringing an end to this one at 48 minutes at 0043 hours GMT on Wednesday, the 15th of March, 2023, and we shall continue updating on all issues in due course in the later edition.